So if you've been following my channel since last year June, you might remember these two people. On the left is a dual citizen Canadian and US citizen, and he owns a motel somewhere in Florida, Hollywood, Florida, or something like that. And the tone that he was giving last year was that he didn't see the big deal of why Canadians are not coming to his motel. And the person on the right is the president and CEO of Visit Fort Lauderdale. And she was one of the first reports where I heard the typical, when you are ready and when you're ready to come back, we will welcome you with open arms. Well, in this video, I'm going to give a little bit of an update on what they're saying now. And the article that I'm going to show you actually has two more motels, and they share their sob story as well. I mean, lack of tourist story as well. I also have a report from the Times News out of the UK. And I think it's important to show this because we have to understand that this audience is different than the typical US report that I show. Not only that, I trust these ones a lot more. So we're going to get into all of this in this video, and let's start off with the report out of Florida. Now, I think I had about a dozen people send this to me, and I realized that this report is actually from CNN. I guess CTV News is just borrowing it or referencing it or something. But it is a long article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing out. I'm going to focus on those two people that we showed earlier, as well as the two motel screenshots that I showed. The article does have a couple Canadians that they did interview who seem to be having a great time there, but I'm not going to give them any attention. But we'll focus on Richard's story. And it says, but this winter wasn't Richard's motel owner Richard Clave and other hotelers in the area had hoped for. Destinations like Greater Fort Lauderdale, long a draw for those seeking a winter warm-up, illustrate how conflicted many once frequent Florida visitors feel about visiting now, and what a decline in visits means for local businesses. Over the years, I've seen a lot of issues, and surprisingly, we were expecting the Orange Guy administration to come in. More prosperity. Really? Everything will be going great, said Clave, a dual Canadian and US citizen who said he voted for the Orange Guy in 2024. Now, the original report that I did last year in June never mentioned who he voted for, but we had that feeling anyways. But now it's confirmed. February 2025 is one of his busiest months at the 7 hotels and extended stay properties he owns in the area that largely target French Canadians, he said. But when the tariffs on Canadian goods took effect in early March last year, Clavet said the cancellations started rolling in, including repeat guests who come in April, often reserved for the following winter, before they even start their drives back north to Canada. A lot of people started to cancel and they stopped reserving. A lot of them were, I would say, polite, and not necessarily saying their reasons for canceling, saying they got sick or making excuses instead. But some of the past guests were more honest about their motivations. One of them canceled, and we called him back and said, "Sir, you're leaving $1,000 on the table, the $1,000 deposit." And he was very firm. He said, "I'm not going over there with that dictator of yours," said Clavet, who called last spring a disaster due to all the canceled bookings at his properties. The impact of the Orange Guy policies, or the perception of them, was enormous last month in April. Now, this report was definitely created by a US citizen, because they're still blaming it on the tariffs. But one thing that kind of surprised me is that this US business owner is surprised that somebody would just give up a $1,000 deposit. I think one thing they need to learn is that it's not always about money. And I've seen different reports in the past where people have given up thousands on pre-booked vacations because they just didn't want to step foot in the United States. This winter season, too, saw a storm of cancellations as well as loyal guests from years past failing to rebook, said Clavet, with some opting a vacation in places like Dominican Republic and Mexico instead. He put all of his efforts into marketing, offering special prices and posting photos of his Richard's Motel family of lodging Facebook page of guests enjoying the weekly soirée hot dog, grill-outs, or bingo nights gathering under the palm trees in the Parc de Amitié. Oh my god. While it dumps snow up north. I swear to everybody, I took French up until grade 11. I just unfortunately forgot all of it. But for all of our Quebec viewers right now, I have to ask you a question. Will seeing a hot dog grill-out or bingo night gathering under a palm tree, will that convince you to go to Richard's Hotel or Motel? If I had to choose between Cancun or the Dominican Republic or a photo of a hot dog grill-out, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go with the Dominican Republic or Cancun. Richard then goes on to say, "I'm working really hard to overcome the effect, but it's serious." Well, it's serious now, and we didn't seem so serious last year. He did manage to drum up some business and felt satisfied by his efforts. So I want to ask the viewers a question. What's your thoughts on this French-Canadian US dual citizen Orange Guy supporter? Last year, when they did an interview with him, there was no confirmation that he actually voted for the Orange Guy. I thought he was just a little bit ignorant. But now we know. In my opinion, you got what you voted for. But continue on with that marketing. Now, this next part talks to Stacy Ritter. Let me read it out. Canadians are far and away the largest international tourism market for the Greater Fort Lauderdale area, said Stacy Ritter, president and CEO of the Visit Fort Lauderdale, who lived in the area since 1974. Now, I did a search on her name, and it appears that she's a former House of Representatives for the Democrats from 1996 to 2004. And that will change my tone a little bit, just a little bit. But she goes on to say, I do not remember a winter without seeing tons of Canadian license plates, so it has been important to this destination for at least half a century. We get about 1 million Canadians visiting the destination each year, she said. Airport arrivals from Canada from 2025 through March of this year at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport were down roughly about 7%, she said. Ritter said 2 destinations in particular, the greater Fort Lauderdale area, had been targeting French-Canadian visitors for the last half a century. A stretch of U.S. Highway number 1 south of Fort Lauderdale, home to Hollywood and Hallandale Beach, has become known as Little Quebec because of the number of French-speaking Canadian snowbirds the area has drawn to modest hotels over the course of a decade. And local hoteliers like Clavet are feeling the hit of a financially chillier winter. But the 2.5 million Canadians who visited Florida last year represented nearly a 15% drop from 2024. The states say Canadians made up 2% of the total visitors, in line with past visitations. Well, I'm really sorry to hear this, Stacey, but you might want to rename Little Quebec to Little Quiet. And I understand that you are a Democrat, but unfortunately you are in a state that is very red. So unfortunately, you're not going to get any sympathy from a lot of Canadians. Now this next one talks about somebody named Jay Gandhi. I don't think I've ever done a report on him. If I did, I might have forgotten about it. But let me read it out. It's titled, Missing the Kind of Customers We Love. You know, the ones that have money. Just a couple blocks from Richard's Motel along US Highway 1. At the one-story Curtis Inn, owner Jay Gandhi painted a bleak picture on how his historically busiest time of the year went this season. We're suffering right now, he said, admitting to having lowered his rates in the double digits, at one point with hopes of filling rooms. Guests at the 28-room motel centered around a courtyard pool are mostly French Canadians during the winter months, and they usually book stays from 2 to 6 weeks, Gandhi said. In the early March, he had 20 empty rooms and no bookings for any Canadians at all for the month of April. Now, I want to pause here because I do want to give a round of applause to our French Canadian viewers. Because I'm not going to listen to any government official or tourism official saying that, things are okay and, domestic tourism is holding up. This business owner right here and what he just said tells the real picture. 20 empty rooms out of a 28-room motel. I mean, that speaks a lot if you ask me. So to our French Canadian viewers, well done. That's really all I have to say. By late March, Gandhi estimated that the winter's Canadian business had been down for him by at least 50% compared to last year. And he's already worried about next year's snowbird season, with the usual deposits not coming in. While some of his missing business was filled with people booking pre- and post-cruise stays, and other short-term travelers, Gandhi says he misses the Canadians, who tend to come for longer and treat his rooms and suite like their own homes. When they go out, they turn off all the lights and even the water if there was a small leak. They say to me, it's going to cost you money. Those are the kind of customers we love. When I hear him say that about Canadians, it makes me realize how different we are from US citizens. I mean, turning off the lights and, saving water and stuff, that just seems like normal to me. Now, I'm going to skip forward in this article because it talks about some Canadians who are, happy to go down to the United States, and they're not going to let politics ruin their fun. If you want to read that part, I'll leave a link in the description below, but I'm not going to read it out. But I want to read this part out. Canadian visitors critically important. Nonetheless, the Canadian visitors didn't really make the journey this year are sorely missed, said Ritter with Visit Fort Lauderdale. Canadian travelers stay longer than domestic travelers and spend more money. And when you're in a community where tourism is your number one industry, any dip is significant. Canadian visitors keep our residents employed through the money that they spend, she said, calling them critically important from a visitation perspective. Now, I appreciate that she actually does recognize that Canadians and international tourists do spend more money and they stay longer. But unfortunately, her country is full of arrogant pricks like this.
This country.
Yeah.
Also, of course, we could survive without a ton of international tourism. I think the tourism industry in America, and I don't know this as a fact, but I think our tourism industry is more based on domestic tourism. During COVID.
Yep, these two clowns are a contributing reason why I don't like the United States right now. Well, that and Bowtie Guy as well. I really hate Bowtie Guy now. Now that I know he's the CEO or president of Ivers. Seriously, fuck that guy. But when you lose your customers that spend 4 digits or even 5 digits in your country on a simple vacation versus the locals who may not even spend close to that, it's going to take a big hit to your local economy, no matter what you say. Now moving on, it talks to the owner of Shell Motel. Let me read this part out. Guy Pitcher, who's co-owner of a Shell Motel along US Highway 1 in Hollywood, said his clientele has changed this season, with fewer Canadians and more cruise ship passengers who were in and out. Demand in the past has been so good that he would normally be calling people in the winter saying, sorry, we have nothing left, or just one night. That's because typically during February and March, Pitcher would be fielding 20 to 40 requests per day from potential guests, mostly French-speaking Canadians, asking for prices and availability. If I get one a day now, it's good. Ouch, that must not be very good for business. Sorry to hear that. So we're almost finished the Snowbird season, and the Canadians are going to be starting to go back. Well, the ones that actually went. But I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more reports out of Florida and Arizona and wherever else the Snowbirds used to go, with business owners saying, "Hey, we didn't see him this year. We don't know what's going on." So I guess to summarize this article that I just read out to you, to all of our Canadian viewers in Quebec, well done on your boycott to Florida, because this right here, what I just read out, is proof that it's working. Now I want to move on to a report that comes from Times Now, and I believe they're from the UK, and they give a good summary on everything that's going on right now and why everyone is avoiding the United States. Now, a lot of this we already know, but it's good to get a recap every once in a while, because sometimes I even forget stuff. Oh, and I just realized I'm already at the 10-minute mark, and you guys haven't heard the co-host yet. It's because she's sleeping, and she's sleeping on my desk, but I can only see her feet. So I'm not about to wake her up. I mean, I'm going to let her sleep. So unfortunately, you might have to wait till the next video to hear her.
The United States welcomes tens of millions of tourists from around the world every year. However, despite its variety of star attractions, America's tourism industry is now in decline. So why are foreign tourists turning away from the land of the free? Recent data shows a worrying trend for the US tourism industry. The number of international arrivals to the US dropped by 5% in 2025 compared with the previous year.
The US has seen a reduction in tourism basically since Trump returned to the White House. That has been driven particularly by countries like Canada, where there have been active kind of attempts to boycott spending money in the US because of Trump's threats to Canadian sovereignty. But you've also seen a decline basically in European visitors, and that is costing the US economy billions and billions of dollars.
You know, I really wonder if the United States... Okay, let me go backtrack a bit. I'm sure the United States probably expected Canada to boycott. But do you really think they expected the Europeans to join in as well? And then the rest of the world? And especially now with the Strait of Hormuz closed, and the orange guy causing a global oil crisis. I don't think the US has any friends anymore. Except for maybe Israel. But then again, Israel might not be a friend. They're just using the United States.
So why are people more reluctant to holiday in America?
There are various reasons why there is a decline. I mean, part of it is about the politics. So, for example, Canadian visitors are staying away specifically in protest at Trump's threats towards Canada. But then you also have a kind of perception problem that is growing because of the protests that you saw in LA and Minneapolis that turned violent with the shootings of Rene Good and Alex Pretty by ICE agents. These sorts of kind of big events have obviously captured global audiences and maybe kind of dissuaded people from following through and booking holidays to the US.
Now, one thing this report from the UK does not include is the disrespect that the US is given. Now, I think Canada has taken the brunt of it, but that is a big reason why we're avoiding the United States. It's the disrespect. So let me know in the comments, what is your number one reason for avoiding the United States and boycotting any products?
In Trump's America, how easy is it to travel to the United States?
There are also changes that have been put forward by the Trump administration that would make it harder to come as a tourist to the US. I mean, most people will travel to the US on an ESTA, which is just a kind of tourism visa, essentially. Under the new changes, you already have to kind of answer a few questions, but the new changes proposed by the Trump administration would see kind of pretty aggressive vetting of people's social media profiles. They'd have to supply details of what they've been posting over the past several years. And that has kind of alarmed people who maybe have tweeted once that they don't like Trump very much.
I'd be in shit. I got a whole YouTube channel calling the orange guy an idiot. But going back to that, I mean, it's supposed to be the land of the free. It's in their freaking anthem. But what's so free about entering a country and having your social media searched and basically being judged on what your social media habits are or what your beliefs are? If you ask me, that's not the land of the free.
And they fear that, that could ruin their holiday. So that's another reason that has kind of caused anxiety and kind of apprehension about coming to the US. The next few years are pretty critical for the US tourism industry, starting just this summer with the World Cup, which is being hosted by the US, Mexico, and Canada. But then also you've got the LA Olympics in 2028. And yet there's this reputational problem that the US tourism industry is trying to battle, which is trying to convince visitors that it's still safe and they're still welcome in the US, which is quite something that, at a time when you would be expecting America to be experiencing a boom in tourism, tourism and profiting from these big world events taking place. In fact, the opposite is happening.
I honestly can't think of a worse situation for the United States. Well, what's actually sad about it is that majority of the US citizens don't understand the situation that they're actually in because they don't care. In the last couple of weeks, I showed videos of US citizens who are completely clueless about what's going on right now. And that's just a small sample. But I am curious to see how these next few months transpire. Because one thing that we got to keep remembering is that last year, any sort of tourism numbers that the US had were padded. And they were padded because we had people who were booking vacations in 2024 before the orange guy took office. Some of them couldn't get the refunds and they had to go to the United States. So this year, we're not going to have that same problem. And some of the border numbers that I'm going to show you in upcoming videos are actually going to show that. And I'm actually excited to show some of these numbers. Now, to close off this video, I do want to share the community photo. And this one is again by Mark, who took a photo of the convention center at my home in Vancouver. I still intend to go home for a visit this year. I just don't know when. Because these flight prices are starting to get out of hand. And of course, we only got one person to blame for that. So that's another reason why I'm pissed off at the United States. But I do appreciate you sharing photos from my home, Mark, and thank you for sending it over. Alright, that's all I got for this video. And sorry, the co-host is still sleeping. If you found any value or agree with anything I said in this video, or you want to hear more from a Canadian and international perspective without the US media bias, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below. That way you'll be notified of my future videos. And if you want to see more of my videos, check out the ones that are going to show up on your screen shortly. Thanks everyone, I'll see you in the next one.